want to put some emphasis on the upcoming prevail of the beast system. For those of us who are practicing Christians, you're reading your Bible, you should know of the Antichrist system, the beast system. My belief is that there are obviously going to be a lot of technological innovations, not only that, but societal changes that are going to help to accompany and bring in the beast system, which is what I call the infrastructure of the Antichrist. Now, I got a few things pulled up for you today. I'll read a few articles for you. But right now, as you're watching this, from the pandemic to the digital currency that we're now going to apparently be rolling out in spring, we are approaching a new vector in the way that we live. Soon everything will be digitized. These pretty coins, they won't have a meaning anymore, no matter how much silver and gold is on them. And you'll have to invent a new way to barter. You'll have to have a new way to have financial transactions if you don't want to participate in the beast system. One of the questions I have, maybe someone out there can answer it better than I can, is that once the beast system is created, you are given the mark on either the right hand or in the forehead. And we know what happens after that. You cannot buy, sell, or trade lest ye have the mark. But before that, the system is going to be there. It's going to be in place. It's been thought about. The policies are being drafted up. The technology has been in the works. The technological guys in the background are building new systems to ensure that you can go completely digitized. Look at the devices that you carry now between your smartwatch and your smartphone. You don't even have to pull out your wallet anymore because now your debit card is saved in your digital wallet on your smart device. Wave your phone, wave your smartwatch in front of the teller, and boom, everything's paid. One day, they will find the way around your freedom of transaction, which also will hinder your freedom of movement, which will also hinder your freedom of speech. All these things are very intertwined. They're very connected. And as the dominoes start to tumble, your free world that you complain about so much is going to progressively get worse and worse. And eventually you will look back and say, man, I wish we could live back in the days of the COVID pandemic. There will, if you don't believe this, there will actually come a time when you will have people like Joe Biden be favored over the next upcoming leaders of the free world. Because as men's hearts start to wax cold for the love of their neighbor, for the love of humankind, our progression as a degenerating society, it's going to show up more in your life. It's going to show up more in your home, and you're not going to escape it. Everyone will be affected. But, and there is a but to this, we were told about all this. Jesus foretold all of this. He said, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, ethnos against ethnos, and that there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. That's Matthew 24. But he also added a very sobering note, that unless these times be shortened, there would be no flesh left alive. There are so many things that are being involved in this beast system, like the rollout of the digital dollar, the rollout of 5G. We're going to talk about that. But right now, I want you to hear a little bit more about the digital dollar from someone a little bit more seasoned than me. I'm quite a follower of Glenn Beck. I like his programs. I like his, how would you say, his attributes at looking at the world. And what he said about the digital dollar recently really struck a nerve with me, and I thought I'd share it with you. So, without further ado, Glenn Beck.
Have happened over the weekend. This one happened during the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. You have a new threshold, and you should be aware of it because the IRS is going to come knocking, and this is why they have 80,000 people. The Internal Revenue Service reminded income taxpayers that due to the American Rescue Plan Act, gig workers who accept any transaction over $600 through a third-party app such as Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, must report those payments. Must report how they're not gonna go after people making $600. Yes, they are. Just a friendly reminder. By the way, there's something else that happened on Wednesday afternoon. And what were you doing Wednesday afternoon? Besides being glued to the TV and the news, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah. You might have been preparing for, I don't know, a holiday weekend where you completely tuned out. So you might have missed what happened Wednesday afternoon at the Fed. But they started their CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. Yes, the Fed coin is here. Now, they rolled it out on Wednesday. That was the only day they could do it, because they've been denying that any of this stuff was happening, but they could only get it when no one was paying attention. So they rolled it out, and it's in its beta test now, but here's the thing. I don't know if it's going to work, because this is what they're trying to do. They're very concerned that they won't be able to make large digital transactions across the Atlantic. Okay? They're worried. These big transactions that happen, what they're doing now, and I'm going to try to break this down because it's very, very technical, but let me break this down for you. What they're doing is they're taking a digital currency and they're buying and selling and trading those digital currency, those dollars, over to someplace else, and they got to make it all the way over. Those numbers have to make it all the way over. Now, that's what they do, but now they're going to take a digital coin, not a digital dollar, a digital coin, and they're going to buy and sell and trade, and those numbers have to go all the way over to another place and finish the transaction.
That's a completely different thing.
Completely.
Not related at all.
Okay, how are you going to do this? You're going to take a whole system that is based on a digital paper dollar. Mm-hmm. You're going to digitize that dollar, and then you're going to just move numbers to another bank. That's a dollar. That's paper. This is a coin. How are you going to do that? Completely different. So they think that as long as it passes its beta test, don't worry, they could have it. They could have it by spring.
So they're essentially taking 20th century technology and using it in the 21st century.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's bold.
But they have to have a name change for it.
You're right.
Remember, this was a Federal Reserve printed currency that had been digitized. Mm-hmm. This is a Federal Reserve digital currency.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So one starts as a digital, the other one has to be transformed digitally. So they've cut that transforming
Wow.
part out, and that's the part where it gets really sketchy. Okay. By the way, India just rolled out its retail pilot program for digital rupees as well. Don't worry. I think maybe we should start having the conversation, because this is coming. Maybe we should start having the conversation of, gosh, this looks like the mark of the beast. I mean, doesn't it?
But surely it's not.
Surely it's not. Of course not.
Not from the U.S. government.
No. They never do anything underhanded or evil.
Never.
Never.
Especially when Democrats are in control.
Amen to that, brother. Hey, by the way, the White House also, last Wednesday, announced that they're going to continue the freeze on student loan payments. Okay? Now, that means millions of people are not making payments on their federal student loans, regardless of their financial situation. They could be millionaires, still are not required to pay back that student loan. Now, the freeze, it started with Trump with COVID-19. Congress approved it. And it was supposed to expire 2 years ago. But it's been continually renewed by Congress, so it's been extended only 8 times. It has now cost you $155 billion per year. And that's scratching the surface. Now, here's the story. You probably didn't even hear that it was renewed again. But let me give you the other part of the story that certainly you haven't heard. This is big because of some of the weird rules that no one pays attention to, but I pay geeks a lot of money to watch this stuff. This is nothing more than a gigantic scam meant to benefit government workers. This is exactly what I told you they would do in 2009. Exactly. How does it benefit the government workers? Well, it's not just the government workers, but many who work for nonprofits as well. Many of those lean left.
So what I want to read to you is from biblicalfoundationsforfreedom.com. And this is going to talk about the character called the Antichrist in the Bible. This was wrote back in 2021 by Paul J. Bucknell. Now the reason why I want to introduce this is because some people are not Christians, some people are new Christians, and some people just do not understand the times that we're in. So hopefully we can bring this together for somebody. If you got your Bibles, please mark down some of the passages that we'll be reading from, and make sure that you do this type of study yourself and with others, and more especially parents with your children. Alright. The Antichrist theme starts with Satan, and then it ends up in Revelation, describing the unholy trinity, Satan, the first beast, and the false prophet. The devil empowers these world-renowned kings, only sometimes that are mentioned in the Bible, and we can safely conclude Antichrist is an embodiment of the evil one who tries to steal the position of the glory of Jesus Christ, the incarnate God himself. Moreover, the Bible hints and prophesies about a coming leader who will attempt to conquer the world and eradicate all vestiges of truth, along with the gospel bringing much persecution against God's people. Further descriptions will come to light as we briefly study several critical Bible passages. The intensity of the Antichrist's role during the Great Tribulation, especially by those believing in premillennialism, makes biblical study more difficult. The good side to popularizing studies of the last times or the end times is that Antichrist is no longer a character hiding under the carpet. Part of the reason why I am writing this topic. The bad side is that we are so convinced that the dispensationalist timeline that we don't look carefully enough at the texts themselves. For instance, Jesus warns us that we are to be aware of the seduction of our faith, and he said, see to it, that you are not misled, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. That's Luke 21, verse 8. But in the Left Behind passages, the books and the movie, it suggests that Christians should not worry about the Antichrist because the rapture happens before he comes. This creates a dangerous false confidence, opposite to what the Bible teaches. There are other challenges, including the interpretation of the Olivet Discourse, Jesus' accounts of the last times, not knowing how much applies to the future or whether there is a double fulfillment, Jerusalem's destruction, and the world's judgment. At the end of the age, somewhere there is a blend. But I will avoid such discussion, look specifically at the developing string of allusions and teaching on Antichrist in the Bible, because Jesus warned of deceivers. We should be extra careful not to leap to the conclusion that the presence of many Antichrist rules will rule out the one coming arch Antichrist. We will begin with a discussion on John's teaching, where the term Antichrist is used, and then take a broader biblical perspective, ending in the book of Revelation. John, the apostle, the author of Revelation, only used Antichrist in 4 verses, 3 in 1 John, and 1 in 2 John. Surprisingly, none of the book in Revelation. A superficial glance at these verses seems to lessen the importance of the Antichrist's coming, seeing that John chiefly speaks of the many then present Antichrists. However, this quick conclusion disguises the main point, the appearance of the Antichrist. We always need to be wary of Antichrist, and Christ plural. The Apostle John forewarns us that the Antichrist is planning at some point to actuate his takeover, something I'm suggesting in the following article that might soon happen. Let's look more closely at what John says in these 4 verses. Children, it is the last hour, and just as you heard that Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that it is the last hour. That's 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. That's 1 John chapter 2, verse 22. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, of which you have heard that it is coming, and now it is already in the world. 1 John chapter 4, verse 3. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist. 2 John chapter 1, verse 7. The term Antichrist, like Christ, is an English translation. The Greek term, something I'm not even going to try to pronounce, simply pronounced Antichrist. Anti. Anti is a Greek preposition not directly meaning opponent. It has a more basic meaning in place of it instead of for, which can be subtly carry the meaning against or counter to, because it replaces the original. Christ is the exact transliteration for Christ, meaning anointed one, or a translation of Messiah from Hebrew. Now, the Apostle John teaches us that believers always ought to be on guard against the many antichrists that rise up to deceive. They are real, numerous in number, and pernicious. Even now, many antichrists have appeared. That's 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Note how he teaches that these antichrists have been around since the early church. That's his time. Believers can detect that these antichrists, as John reveals, through their deceptive teaching, though their teaching has some resemblance of the truth. It sufficiently perverts the gospel to keep us from a saving faith. Now, these many deceivers are aptly named Antichrist because they do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. 2 John chapter 1, verse 7. The early church faced the gospel-denying cult called Gnostics because of their assumptions from Greek philosophy. Denying God could take on flesh. They denied Jesus Christ was God, became human, suffered, and then died for mankind. Gnosticism took on various forms, but though they still claimed Christ as the Redeemer, they distorted the gospel by teaching that the Spirit came upon a man named Jesus, but left him before the cross. The Gnostics denied the incarnation of God in Jesus. John very clearly warned that the developing cult would spread false thought and belief. The gospel requires faith in God's Son, His servant, which is Isaiah 53, to die for our sins. So this cult, though seemingly respectful of God's holiness, unattached human flesh, was false and deceptive. Any false teaching that undermines the gospel teaching is from the spirit of the Antichrist. Not just what those false teachers taught. The ancient cult denied Jesus was human, while a major modern cult today contaminates many denominational seminaries and theological schools, denying Jesus is God. The appearance of many antichrists, even up to today, proves it is the last hour, the significant period before Jesus Christ returns and forms the new heavens and earth. Because John speaks much of these antichrists, some conclude that John denies the fact of one arch antichrist. However, this conclusion would be premature. John, in two ways, affirms the coming of the evil one in Antichrist. The spirit of the Antichrist. John states in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, "Every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist." The phrase "spirit of the Antichrist" implies that one arch Antichrist spirit influences others across the world and time to carry out his grand deceptive purposes. The Antichrist sponsors these false teachings, and though his schemes remain yet hidden, the devil is waiting for the right time to perch Antichrist on top of the world's governments. Proponents of false teachings operate by a false spirit from Satan, influence them to varying degrees. Therefore, the presence of many antichrists does not preclude the existence of an antichrist, but instead proves his reality. We can think of a similar situation when the Spirit of God came upon Old Testament prophets. God's existence can be detected by the way he inspired his prophets. Satan, contrastingly, inspires the spirit of the Antichrist, which equally stirs up false teachers and antichrists through their easily observed, deceptive, and untrue character. These 4 verses teach one Antichrist, one arch Antichrist, along with the fact that many antichrists were even then popping up in the early church period. Even now, many antichrists have appeared. Evil spirits influence antichrists. Their mission as deceivers is to carry forth the deadening darkness of falsehood, even gospel-denying teaching, and the counter to sound doctrine. Like animal droppings, we know a dog or a cat has been around by their waist. So it is with the Antichrist and his false teaching. But John makes an even more straightforward assertion of the Antichrist's coming. Pay careful attention to John's statement. Children, it is the last hour, and just as you heard that the Antichrist is coming, 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Do you see how John the Apostle stated, the Antichrist is coming? Don't miss it. The early church heard it and was accepted as a sound doctrine by them. You might wonder why John uses a small a for Antichrist. And we are now talking about the capital A, Antichrist. In the end, it is up to the listener to capitalize or not, depending on this context. The original Greek manuscripts were composed of all capitals. I confidently capitalize the uses of Antichrist because John speaks of one Antichrist coming. The Greek does not have the article preceding it there, the, but equally and clear uses a demonstrative pronoun, that Antichrist, to designate a certain understood entity, which is different from the other Antichrists. So, the Antichrist is still coming. The author of 1 John can speak of the awareness of the community that Antichrist will come. That's in chapter 2, verse 18, chapter 4, verse 3. Antichrist is here and is a coming apocalyptic figure. This figure is connected with the opponent of God in Jewish apocalyptic. The opponent of God increases his power and dominion on earth just before the apocalypse happens. He is then judged and then destroyed. The teaching of a coming of Antichrist must have been so clear that John did not need to introduce or further clarify who he was. They already knew this, just like many understood the coming of Antichrist today. Though John speaks of Antichrist, he makes sure that they remember that the Antichrist is still coming, for he will bring an extraordinary wave of deception. In summary of this article, the spirit of the Antichrist actively works behind the scenes whenever a teacher uses false teaching to confuse and cover up the genuine gospel. His main purpose is to deceive. The Antichrist uses people and false prophets to propagate his deceptive ideals, but one day he himself will come. The spirit of the Antichrist proves that the arch enemy, seen in one chief Antichrist, is still strategizing and biding his time until everything is set for his grand coming. The book of Revelation and other passages from Paul teaches that he is an incarnation of the devil and very deceptive, deceiving even the elect if it wasn't for God's grace. Jesus openly said, "For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect." That's Mark chapter 13, verse 22. Man, I get goosebumps when I read that. If this is true with a false prophet, surely the Antichrist deception will be all the more devious. Now, there are legends and stories in the apocalyptic books about a coming Antichrist, not just in Christian literature, but also throughout Jewish and Muslim teachings. However, we limit our discussion to carefully select the most relevant Old and New Testaments to see how the theme of Antichrist grows until his full disclosure in the book of Revelation. Remember, though no matter how terrifying and powerful the Antichrist appears, God watches over all of his people. If you do not know Jesus, this work of the powerful deceiver is good enough reason to fear your sin and call upon Jesus Christ to save you today. In the form of the serpent, Satan shows up early in the garden, charmingly deceives and steals mankind's allegiance for himself. Adam and Eve fell for his trick and listened to the deceiver rather than to the maker. The Antichrist seeks to become the king priest, to counter Jesus Christ as the genuine king priest. So throughout the Old Testament, we see a large scattering of many in and out of Judaism, world leaders who dominate the world governments and religions. The book of Daniel speaks of the demonic forces behind the world powers like Babylon and Persia. But later, starting in chapter 7, Daniel introduces a little horn. Possessed eyes, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. That's Daniel 7:8 and chapter 8, verse 9. After clear prophecies of Christ's coming are made in Daniel's chapter 9, verses 24 to 27, the theme of the Antichrist becomes further described. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, we hear, "So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah, literally the anointed one, the prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Right on the heels of this prophecy of Christ the Messiah comes the Antichrist. Note his descriptive work bringing desolation in Daniel chapter 2, verse 27. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put up a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." So are we to suppose, as many do, that he, in verse 27, he will make a firm covenant, is the Antichrist? We should remember, others see this he as pointing to the Messiah, who would come and stop all sacrifices when he came to judge Jerusalem in 70 AD. But even if this is true, verse 27 causes us to speculate on another one, who would come and bring destruction, make desolate. While some believers see this as a conclusive prediction of the Antichrist, some don't. But Daniel's word on Antichrist importantly continues, such as in Daniel 11. "Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. Then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all. Daniel 11, verses 34 to 37. These passages point to the Antichrist. He exalts himself above all others, even God. History has confirmed how Antiochus Epiphanes, the little horn, to a degree, fulfilled this in history, but apocalyptic literature allows one to extend, if not merge, its meaning to depict the coming of a great Antichrist in the final times, the end days. They appear correct in this interpretation as Daniel 12 continues to direct our thoughts to the very end of time and beyond, filled again with cryptic statements and, more importantly, helping to confirm our interpretation of chapter 9 and possible movements of Antichrist. Daniel chapter 12 verses 11 through 13 says, "From the time that the daily sacrifice is removed, and the abomination that causes desolation is set in place, there are 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits and attains to the 1,335 days. But you should go your way until the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days you will arise to receive what you have been allotted." The Old Testament strangely introduces the Antichrist. It's hard to be convinced of the Antichrist coming from the Old Testament. We should honestly state that any confidence in the theme of Antichrist in the Old Testament comes from the New. Be careful not to be too dogmatic on what are some very cryptic verses. Now, the New Testament's teachings on the Antichrist, however, will bring further clarification that made the coming of that Antichrist, the capital A Antichrist, into commonly accepted teaching along with the second coming of Christ. Let's glance over what the New Testament teaches. The different schemes of eschatology, the study of last times, the end times, admittedly influences what Christians think about an Antichrist, but we will glean directly from the Scriptures. From our study of 1 John, we should at the minimum accept and guard ourselves against the coming of Antichrist, whatever form it takes. But let's look at what Jesus, Paul, Peter, and John in Revelation say. Though I try to be representative, I acknowledge that I am introducing all the Scriptures connected to Antichrist. So, here's Jesus on the Antichrist, which is Mark chapter 13, verses 14 to 27. "Unless the Lord had shortened those days, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, whom he chose, he shortened the days. And then, if anyone says to you, 'Behold, here is the Christ,' or 'Behold, here he is there,' do not believe them. For false Christs and false prophets will arise, and will show signs and wonders, in order to lead astray, if possible, the elect. But take heed. Behold, I have told you everything in advance." That's Mark chapter 13, verses 20 to 23. Just as in Daniel, Jesus allows overlapping of historical events, the destruction of Jerusalem and all the horrific events that followed, to merge into a collection of threats to the world, ending up with Christ's return for his people, Mark 13:27. Jesus speaks of false Christs and false prophets. Though not using the term Antichrist, Jesus, like John, uses a variant, false messiahs, pseudo-Christs, with very similar meaning. Jesus leaves the subject open so that others will anticipate false Christs and be warned, rather than allowing them to get preoccupied with the coming of one Antichrist. Fostering ongoing alertness was precisely John's point in his epistles. However, Jesus does say that the days will get more intense with the manifestation of evil, even assaulting the elect. The deception will increase, and therefore all saints everywhere of each generation need to pay heed lest they get caught up in the schemes of the evil one. Here's Paul's take on the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians, starting at verse 3. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Now Paul joins others from the previous generations to warn of an exceptionally deceptive period. The Thessalonian believers mistakenly thought that Jesus had already come the second time. Paul corrects them by establishing the coming of an Antichrist as a sign of Christ's soon return. The part that says, it will not come, in verse 3 refers to verse 1, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to Him. So Paul links some of Daniel's esoteric language to identify this self-exalting man of lawlessness. The clarity on interpreting Daniel is affirmed by Paul's own words here. Antiochus Epiphanes served as a precursor to the evil one, just as some thought Hitler did when pursuing the extinction of the Jews. Paul does not use the term capital A Antichrist, but directly alludes to Daniel 11 and the titles Man of Lawlessness and Son of Destruction, again depicting the early church's beliefs. John summarized it by saying the community had a strong expectation that Antichrist would at some time flaunt himself above all, making himself visible and then worshipped. Here's Peter's take on the Antichrist in 2 Peter, starting at verse 1. But false prophets also arose, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will also be false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. Peter in his letters does not speak of one Antichrist, but many false prophets. John called false prophets antichrists, but Peter is content to speak of them as false teachers and prophets. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 1, focusing on the immediate challenge he and the church faced. As John mentioned, they would introduce heresies denying Jesus Christ, but their end will be sure judgment, which we see John conclusively articulating in the book of Revelation. Speaking of, let's go to it. John the Revelator, in the book of Revelation, starting at chapter 13, verses 1. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his throne, and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast?" The seven churches in Revelation 2 and 3 look like what Peter, Paul, and John wrote of the early church. The book of Revelation, however, steps into the last moments of the church on earth. The many false teachers retreat behind the scenes and join the other worshippers of the beast. No doubt, that is the Antichrist. The dragon, i.e. Satan, stands on the seashore, evidently instrumental in raising the beast from the sea, with all the power of the earth, wearing 10 crowns matched with great, unsurpassed earthly powers. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So, though we do not see the word Antichrist used here or in Revelation, we see the personification of evil. The dragon is likened to the serpent of old, and so animates this beast, giving him all sorts of power and authority. This is no doubt a person who controls the world governments. Regardless of your eschatological belief, we should agree that a world figure empowered by the devil will have a voracious appetite for a devoted worship. The believer's reluctance to worship will be the reason for him to make them his prey. That worship will be directed towards the beast, the Antichrist, but it will reach the devil who, from his departure from God, lusted for mankind's worship. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And so, our statement that the beast is the incarnation of the devil seems to be accurate. Before leaving Revelation, let us note that there appears to be another Antichrist, the second beast. Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 to 12. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all of the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. We have seen all along that Satan's manifestation in one arrogant person seeking the worship of the world. This beast is the Antichrist that John and the early church speaks of. But who is the second beast? The one which comes up out of the earth. And are there really 2 Antichrists? There is such a close intertwining of the two that they appear to be one. The suggestion that the second beast refers to Christendom's compromised religious head, the message of Revelation by Michael Wilcock, notes how he causes those on the earth to worship that first beast. In Revelation chapter 19, verse 20, he is called the false prophet, and so, perhaps, he is the leader of the apostatized Christian church. Revelation chapter 19, verse 20. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet, who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. These 2 were thrown alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. The scripture works together to depict Antichrist as Satan's incarnation. He who seeks and secures the world's worship for a moment. Again, though, there only can be one Antichrist, but they work together to decide to deceive God's people, right? The second beast, the false prophet, which makes the whole earth worship the first beast. These two beasts, the government and the religious leader, then together attempt to undermine the true Christ, who is the king and the priest, the head of the government and the religious leader. As we go further into this, I want you to understand that the introduction of the Antichrist is now at your fingertips. Start doing your own research and recognizing the signs of the times. We live in a day of age where things are starting to be linked together to appear very climatic. I want to read a few things to you before I let you go. There are many things that are going to be attacking us from every angle that I believe is part of the beast system. One of them, I agree with some people, is the 5G system. Now, before I get too far deep into the weeds, I just want to read from the ChristianObserver.net. The rollout of 5G, authorized by the FCC in conjunction with other U.S. agencies, the Department of Defense, the CIA, the FBI, is another experiment in the weaponization of the internet and all digital technologies that surround it, including the use of cell phones, wireless broadcasting, wireless computers, and the 100 billion wireless devices that will be connected to the Internet of Things in the next few years. These things will be how the world will see the Antichrist and interact with him. Now, Tom Wheeler, a former chair of the SEC, has openly stated that we will not wait for standards. If something can be connected, it will be connected. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant water. It's quite evident from this statement that they would have to drop a payload on us to create this kind of a connection. It's all about speed and unlimited data, or so we're told, right? This is going beyond alarming because it's damaging our health. 5G is an ultra-high frequency that's used in military crowd control, and they induce so much pain that people literally have to run away. I've actually experienced this before. We use the machine's called an LRAD, and it sucks to be in front of. We do use it for riot control. In fact, in all of our operations that we had in Portland that involved the riots, we had the LRAD sitting right there, and were never given access to use them. Now, these frequencies operate in the gigahertz range, or billions of oscillations per second. Our bodies operate about 7 hertz, which is 7 oscillations per second. So nobody can avoid being exposed. And on the top of the increased number of 5G transmitters, even within the housing and shops and in the hospitals, according to the estimates, will also be on light poles, power poles, on tops of public buildings, spanning approximately every 500 feet. 10 to 20 billion connections from refrigerators to washing machines, surveillance cameras, self-driving cars and buses. This will all be a part of the Internet of Things. Your smartwatch, the phone that you stick in your pocket. These are all ultra-high frequency waves, and they'll operate 24/7 and present significant biological and health risks to residents. Also, the antenna emissions have been calculated on the basis of 6 watts of power, yet there is the potential to turn up the power to 300 to 500 watts with 0 monitoring required. Millimeter waves do not go through buildings and thus are absorbed by plants and by rain. They are an inch to a half inch long. Moreover, trees, which are desperately losing because of the amount of aerosol spraying that we have in our skies, are also being cut down to make way for the 5G beast system. Every time you drive down the road, you go look at this pristine forest. A couple years later, it's a parking lot. It's a strip mall that should have never been there. It's all part of this. Here's some of the dangers, the effects of 5G millimeter waves. It penetrates the epidermis, that's the skin. The sweat ducts will act like an antenna. Ocular damage, that's your eyes. Causes DNA single and double strand breaks. Oxidative damage. Disruption of cell metabolism, increased blood-brain barrier permeability. Melatonin reduction, disruption of brain glucose metabolism. Generation of stress proteins, heart damage, effects on bacteria resistance, damages plant life and cell structure. And then we have Disease X. Joe Imbriano from the Fullerton Informer says this: Disease X will not be one of pathogenic origin, but rather a disease of electromagnetic exposure, specifically one from chronic exposure to military-grade weaponized millimeter wave wireless communication systems that are already being deployed everywhere with the 5G rollout. Millimeter waves are absolutely militarized weaponry. Millimeter waves is not about faster downloads and convenience. This is about irradiating the population. And they will be installing microwave cells instead of the huge towers that are already in place, and you drive by these all the time, you don't recognize them. And they have generator systems the size of shipping containers next to them. They will accompany cables 4 to 5 inches in diameter every 500 feet, and they'll house a couple thousand volts of power in them. And this is nothing more than a skillfully diabolical kill grid that is coming to all towns and all cities across the world. Anywhere there's human population, this will be there. Due to time constraints, we'll pick back up on this. We'll cover the second part of the Antichrist infrastructure, which will be the digital money system. But I'm laying it out for you. Please take the information I give and do your own research. Don't beat me up over my own opinions. This is coming from the Bible. All I want is to be able to have you to be prepared. And for those of you who are questioning your faith right now, this is the greatest time ever to be alive, because we're seeing prophecies being fulfilled. So may the Spirit of God anoint you and be filled in you. May you walk holy after the Master. And stay frosty. The enemy is out there. For those of you who would like to donate to the American Vindicta Show and to see this show stay on the air, please go to the Give Send Go page that we have. Just type in Give Send Go, and then it'll be the American Vindicta Show. You can also see where you can send in any donations or love offerings into the American Vindicta Show from our P.O. box that you can find on the AmericanVindictaShow.com. If you ever have any questions, you can always email me at AmericanVindictaShow.com. My goal is to serve you as I serve our Lord. So if you have questions, you need help with anything, prepping, practicality-wise, tactical-wise, or just someone to talk to, I'm always there. Send me an email. God be with you all. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum has said, "You will own nothing, and you will love it." And that's represented by what's going on across the planet today, where the economy of the world is in free fall, and nowhere is it more in evidence than with our own President Biden deliberately trying to sabotage what we have. Access to food, other resources. So Americans are in a unique position, really for the first time in our history. We're going to have to provide for ourselves or subject ourselves to the whim of the government. Do you really trust a government to feed you that left 1,000 Americans behind enemy lines in Afghanistan? I don't think so. So where do you go? When you ask the question, who's the best prepper out there today? There's only one answer. Ready-Made Resources and Robert Griswold. I call him King Prepper, and that's how a lot of people think of him. You have everything there you'd want, from night vision to storable food, how to prepare cooking in emergency situations, books and videos on how to prepare alternative energy, communication, first aid that you wouldn't think of, natural antibiotics, you name it. Bob has it. Now, here's the good thing about Bob Griswold that no one else does but him. You don't have to buy anything to talk to him. If you're not sure where to start with your preparation, no obligation phone call directly to Bob. You can talk to him for free. Most people will charge you an arm and a leg for a half-hour conversation. That's not Bob Griswold. He cares about helping America get prepared. Go to readymaderesources.com, or you can call the number directly at 800-627-3809. Again, that contact information, readymaderesources.com for the best prepping outfit in the country, or call Bob Griswold directly, 800-627-3809.
Mountain State Survival covers your basis for your planning, prepping, evacuation, bugging in, or bugging out needs. They carry anything from educational material, camping supplies, emergency services supplies, food, first aid, survival kit and equipment, shooting gear, survival gear, tactical gear. They carry it all. They got it in stock. Give Mountain State Survival a ring. That's mountain-state-survival.com. Get this type of supplies while you still can. 304-517-6935. Mountain State Survival is one of the only places that I know of currently that is still carrying the delicious Peak Refuel meal that is ready to eat. It's personally the only thing that I eat at this point whenever I go out camping, whenever we have any type of emergency or disaster situation. That is the meal that I stick with, and you can find that at mountain-state-survival.com. Use REKKR5 for a 5% discount on your overall purchase. That's REKKR 5. mountainstatesurvival.com.
This show on the Heroes Nation app. Heroes Nation is the Heroes Nation app you can download in the App Store. It's up and coming. They got a lot of cool information on there. That is the main backup site so far for the American Vindicta show. We'll also have some stuff on there that won't be on YouTube. It won't be on Rumble. It'll either be only on the gsradio.net, who is the host of the American Vindicta show, or it will only be an exclusive for Heroes Nation. And with that, I mean, stuff that we're doing with the cave exploration, with the archaeological stuff. I'm going to start getting into a lot of paranormal talks and, coming at that from my law enforcement and Christian perspective, and be having guests on, and that will be exclusive to Heroes Nation. So make sure that you give them some love. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for supporting me. God bless you, and have a good day.